This video is how I came to my present music tastes and why I'm no longer King James only. I'm still growing, so not all I say here may be doctrinally correct. But many King James only people are mad at me, and I want to give them an explanation so that I won't be a stumbling block to them. You might say, I can't believe you're advocating Jesus Christ Superstar and Let It Be from the Beatles for music and the New Living Bible for devotions. You used to be against rock music and against all Bibles except the King James. You're an apostasy. Well, it's Jesus Christ and Brent Spiner's fault. Blame it all on them. When I married my ex, he was an avid King James only man. And when he introduced me to Peter Ruckman, I told him he was crazy and that I didn't want to hear Peter Ruckman. I was thinking of going to Bob Jones University and had read their literature about Peter Ruckman. I was also a Bible college graduate, and at the Bible college I went to, even though they recommended the King James and said all rock music was satanic, they couldn't state with clarity why the King James was superior. So when I read Bob Jones' literature about the New American Standard and other versions easier to understand, and that only the original Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic were inspired, that made sense. I thought, how could anyone claim that the King James was superior because years and years of copies happened before the King James came into existence? Only the originals could be inspired. So it was necessary to study the originals if you wanted to do deep Bible study. But I fell in love with my ex, and out of love and respect for him, I read and listened to Peter Ruckman and his argument that the originals were lost and that God never promised to preserve the originals. Therefore, the inspired Bible was preserved in the King James Bible because God promised to preserve his word. And Ruckman used Psalm 12, 6 and 7, among other verses, to support his claims. His greatest argument was that the Textus Receptus, from which the King James was translated, was the only line of manuscripts that had not been tampered with by the Roman Catholic Church. He didn't seem like one who would lie, so I believed him. I always liked the King James anyways, and was raised on it, and to please my new husband, I adopted his belief as my own because it made sense to me at that time. So from 1987 to this year, I have been an avid King James only believer. I read and devoured Peter Ruckman's books, and they seem to really open up the Bible to me. That's because he believes in a literal interpretation of all English passages in the King James, and much of this is correct. Though I no longer agree with him that the King James is the only inspired Bible, I feel he's fairly accurate in some of his biblical interpretations. I asked Jesus Christ if it's true, as Ruckman teaches, that tribulation saints will have a different plan of salvation from ours, and that they will have to honor Jewish law and keep the 10 Commandments. Jesus said that is correct. However, he disagrees with some King James only people who feel the Sermon on the Mount is for the millennial saints. I asked him which book applies to millennial saints. Jesus said the book of Revelation. I would like to say up front that Jesus doesn't like it when I become so future-oriented that I forget to live in the present. And for instance, when I asked him if it's true that there will be another rapture after the rapture of the church and that there will be a rapture of tribulation saints towards the end of the tribulation, as Ruckman teaches, Jesus said he pleads the fifth on that one. When he meets with me, he never brings up these future things. He always discusses problems of the present with me, like areas where I need to grow. Jesus mostly teaches by example and only verbally corrects me when nothing else will work. I learned that it is okay for Christians to drink wine as long as they don't get drunk, because when Jesus took Brent out to dinner, Brent ordered wine and Jesus said nothing. Jesus knew I'd notice this and find the Bible verses for this on my own, so he's never brought it up. I discussed this on another video. Jesus showed me that rock music is not sinful again by example. In that one time when he flew a car in the air because he didn't want to go through rush hour traffic to take Brent home, Brent says he was jiving to his favorite Christian rock. I read that and concluded rightly that rock music, or at least Christian rock, is not sinful. I was amazed at how hip Jesus is. He's really cool, and he is much more understanding of our weaknesses and frailties than we give him credit for. He told me he's not the cock blocker that everyone thinks he is. He really respects a loving and vast heart. But he does not like sexual treachery like what the Gail android does or Jesuit Laurie McBride. I first met Jesus one-on-one when my men told me that Jesus stated as he exited the scene after he saved Brent Spiner's life from a Jesuit who tried to assassinate him, that I rocked and I was his favorite. This was my first acquaintance with him one-on-one outside of knowing him through the Bible and prayer. I immediately liked him and thought he was pretty cool. I had no idea at that time if he would make any more direct statements to me, but was flabbergasted by the personal attention from God himself. I have absolute faith in my men and know they wouldn't lie to me, so I believed they told me the truth about Jesus. Jesus began speaking to me directly right after I prayed and asked him to rescue my men from Satan incarnate Zach Knight, who was forcing my men to have gay sex with each other against their will. Jesus showed up and zapped Zach Knight in the balls and chased him off. I thought, man, this Jesus is cool. He then turned to me and said, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." I thought, man, this Jesus is attractive and cool. I always thought him real dignified and sort of aloof, but he was very personable, down to earth, and used everyday hip language to express himself. I liked him at once. Over the past year, Jesus has met with me many times, sometimes to praise me, but usually to correct me. That's because he doesn't like to interfere with me, because Zach Knight wants to seduce me and already has one time. But Jesus rescued me. And so Jesus likes for me to grow on my own, mostly through Bible study and prayer and learning through my life and my spirit. Jesus discussed all sorts of topics with us, and Brent Spiner really got to know him because he took Brent out to lunch just about every day in 2012. Often when Brent and Terrance spoke to me on Skype, Jesus would show up. One time he arrived with symphony music orchestra in the background. It was not rock. However, I think he listened to rock on purpose that one time, so I'd notice it and realize that rock is not sinful. Later, he would tell me out and out that rock music is not sinful, and even gave a sample of some music he likes, which was some Christian rap music from a very hip church in Ohio. So as a result of my musical experiences with Jesus, I've changed some of my music format for Church of Gail. Terrance suggested I listen to Jesus Christ Superstar, as I'd never listened to it before because it was condemned. But when I listened to it, it really showed the hip and human side of Jesus, which I've gotten to know this year, and so I felt it represented this side of him. In the playlist where I use this music, I've balanced it out with other music that shows Jesus' vast and deep side. Jesus is very approachable to us, and yet I sense he has very high standards in the area of the Spirit, and his Spirit is truly awesome, divine, and holy. He's hip, but he's vast, deep, direct, courageous, and awesome. He's very concise when he speaks, gets right to the point, using hip language that we understand. He's also a gentleman, and sometimes just sits there and listens to us talk to each other. He waited a while to approach me about the King James because he knew how attached I am to it. But when the time was right, he brought it up, and I've pretty much shared at my website's opening page and in my previous videos what he said about it. He did mention that the New Living Bible was more accurate than the King James, so I read and listened to it out of curiosity at the blueletterbible.com website. I found that when I listened to it while reading the King James on my lap at the same time, it helped me to better understand the King James, so that is why I've changed my devotional format and have invited the world to study along with me at my website, www.gabrielchana.com. I have asked Jesus which denomination follows him the closest, and the answer he gave me was that all Christians have more in common than they have differences, emphasizing that he doesn't like it when we argue over minor areas of doctrine and wants us to focus more on living for him. He told me my spirit and struggles would teach my followers the most, so I strive to keep the focus there in my videos. Jesus had to hit me a little hard to wean me from my worship of the King James Bible, but he waited until I had developed a pretty strong one-on-one relationship with him before he did so. He has not encouraged me to abandon the King James, but not to worship it. On my own, I decided to explore the New Living Bible, since he praised it as more accurate than the King James, and have found it really helps me understand the King James better. I read both of them. Right before Jesus confronted me about the King James Bible, I happened upon some material by Fred Butler, trained through John MacArthur. He went to a seminary that you can access at my website. I encourage all King James only people to explore his website. I do not completely agree with his spirit or all that he teaches. He accuses Dr. Ruckman of not being saved. I think Dr. Ruckman is saved. And I think he should stay out of character attacks. But he seems to really know what he's talking about. And he presents a lot of evidence that backs up what Jesus told me. When Jesus said any Bible translated from the earliest manuscripts are fine with him, and that he has preserved his word in several English and other translations, not just the King James. And he said that modern translators, like the translators of the NIV, New American Standard, and New Living, have considered the inaccuracies of the Roman Catholic manuscripts. So if you're mad at me because I am no longer King James only, you are actually mad at Jesus Christ because he doesn't want me to be a